I would like to pass over this to you, Jane, to begin with your introduction.
Thanks, Kylie. So, thank you. We have people joining, so I apologize for the doorbell. I'm not sure how to take that off. But what I wanted to say for today's webinar to set the context is we see that it's more important than ever to support micro and small enterprises, the MSEs in question today. They are critical lifelines in their communities as providers of essential goods and services to underserved and last mile populations. In the markets where BFA Global, we do our work, the majority of those MSCs are informal in nature, in that their businesses are run without formal accounts, and therefore their interactions with the formal economy are limited. According to the Ministry of Trade and Industry in Ghana, informal workers make up 85% of the urban economy in Ghana. And during COVID, the livelihoods of the informal MSC sector have been especially impacted, with 44% of self-employed losing jobs, and micro enterprises especially affected by the loss in revenue, loss in sales. Likewise, in South Africa, informal MSCs, in particular, the shopkeepers, the Spazas, have suffered a similar fate, which was further exacerbated by ecosystem type constraints, such as capital, inventory, management, and cash transaction challenges. These are not singular to South Africa and in common in what we see in other markets throughout the continent, including Ghana. Therefore, BFA is working with our partners on several COVID response programs. One of those programs is Catalyst Fund, Inclusive Digital Commerce. This is an accelerator with the support of MasterCard Foundation and in partnership with MEST as our country partner. And this program seeks to improve the livelihood and resilience of informal MSCs. And we're doing this by supporting 6 growth stage digital commerce companies. These are companies that are enabling informal MSCs to digitize and better access digital commerce. Today, you'll meet 2 of our companies, Boost Ghana and Kurigo, later in the session. And now I'd like to present you to my colleague, Lebo Mokabudi, to introduce one of our other programs, Digital Spazas. Lebo.
Thanks, Jane. Good afternoon, everybody in South Africa and Ghana and the world, the globe. As Jane has indicated that we saw the challenges faced by Spaza owners and informal traders in South Africa, who face challenges with accessing working capital, challenges with digital payments, challenges with using cash, right? And as a response to this, we developed a program supported by JP Morgan Chase Foundation. We were offering catalytic grant capital to 3 tech innovators who support Spaza owners. And really the focus of the program will be running innovation pilots with these tech entrepreneurs, where the focus will be enabling digital payment solutions, stock management solutions, digital ordering and delivery of stock, as well as access to appropriate financial solutions. Today, you'll hear from one of our innovators, A2Pay, where Tina Mason will share her experiences with A2Pay and running solutions or developing appropriate solutions in the township economy. And we also have Yebo Fresh. We also supported Yebo Fresh and Vuleka, who are part of this program. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane and Lebo. Moving on very quickly, I'd like now to invite Malika, our head of insights, to share the presentation with us.
Great. Thank you, Coyote and team. I am very excited to be joining you this morning, very, very early from California. So you'll excuse me as my household behind me gets going. I wanted to take the opportunity to share a little bit of the data and research that's informed the way we're thinking about MSEs and small businesses in Africa and what we think the opportunity really is around digitization, digital commerce, and that whole journey. So I have, a little bit of information innovators. I think that, Jane's already done a great job setting up for us what the, the dramatic implications of the pandemic have been. Coyote, do you, or I don't, Akansha, do you mind going to the next slide? If we look particularly, at the African context, what you're looking at is the number of unique subscribers in Rwanda in the few weeks after lockdown was announced. And already what we're seeing is that the number of unique mobile subscribers is skyrocketing, right? So people are immediately finding ways to shift from traditional in-person, offline ways of purchasing and interacting with the world around them to digital ways. And moreover, especially in the African context, what we know to be true is that they encounter an environment that is ripe for that kind of shift, right? So especially in our East African favorites, there's a mobile money infrastructure, there's a rapidly growing 5G and 4G network connections, there's affordable devices increasingly, and a kind of globalized ecosystem acceptance of digital ways of doing and digital ways of paying. Next slide, Jane. This is particularly true if we think about the implications for e-commerce. So, I live in Latin America, and as people were trying to make the switch to digital means of purchasing and digital means of payment, they encountered a much less accessible system. What we have seen in the Africa context is that once people made the switch, they found, that the transactions, volumes, number of participants all skyrocketed. And in the fintech community, we were really happy to see that. We were excited to see our colleagues sort of at Paystack benefit from that switch. Jumia saw numbers that they've been trying to go after for years. The exciting part is that many of these customers are new customers to e-commerce. And the initial evidence, the sort of, the polls and the surveys that people are doing is that people are enjoying the online purchasing experience and intend to stick with it. So you'll see a stat there that 50% of customers in Brazil and South Africa during this time are new customers. So the pandemic, even though there might be a silver lining to the pandemic, let's say, in helping accelerate this journey for many of us that are hoping that digital ways of doing could improve access, price, diversity, etc. I think the question for us has been, well, given this shift, to what extent are MSEs, small business owners, the underserved, often marginalized businesses, how well are they able to access these new ways of doing? How well are they able to take advantage of the opportunity? And the evidence that we've been able to gather is, one, difficult to gather, so the evidence is thin and scant, and two, paints a kind of mixed picture. What is abundantly clear is that MSEs, particularly in the African context, are doing an amazing job leveraging their mobile phone and social media to access new customers, to make offers, to market, to contact folks, to even close sales, oftentimes accept the payment via digital money, but that it stays within a kind of social media or mobile phone environment, right? So we're not talking about what we might consider traditional e-commerce. They don't have online storefronts. They're not necessarily leveraging online marketplaces. They're using social media platforms to get their business done in really creative, exciting ways, and ways that we saw, at least in China and some other countries, help their businesses survive the pandemic. So when their storefronts closed, those that were already digital in China, for example, were much better able to survive the pandemic than those that were not digital prior to the pandemic. What you see on the left is again a little bit of evidence to that point, sort of the kinds of platforms that MSCs are using and for what purposes. And they're the big bars that you see are against Facebook and WhatsApp, not surprisingly. Maybe similarly true about our own lives. In the next slide, I wanted to just zoom in a little bit on Ghana, where we actually were able to do a little bit of research, of in-person research in the third quarter of last year. And our results echoed exactly what I was just outlining, which is that MSEs leverage social media, and most remarkably, WhatsApp and SMS. So we found 85% of MSEs that we surveyed 400 MSEs in the sort of Accra and Greater Accra area, so urban, peri-urban situations. And this included everybody from sort of people with carts and kiosks to those with storefronts. And 85% of them are using WhatsApp for marketing. From there, 89% of them move a kind of social media interaction already to a phone interaction. So they're then calling the customer to sort of confirm an order, then oftentimes writing it down in a book. So even once you get past the first step, the interaction is already significantly less digital. In an environment like Ghana, a strong mobile money ecosystem, the mass majority of them are accepting payment via mobile money. And what we heard from folks on the ground is that they really like accepting things via mobile money, that it facilitates non-in-person delivery, sort of remote delivery that allows them to keep records. So a few that we spoke to actually keep a separate mobile money account for their business and a separate one for their personal accounts. And what you'll see in the boxes on the right are that's sort of where the digital journey ends for these folks. From there, they actually, wrap up the good, may it be like a lunchbox or product, etc. Walk across the market and hand it to a motorcycle driver normally, and then those writers take the good to the customer, and oftentimes there's a follow-up phone call to make sure that the customers receive the good in question. And interestingly, when we did this work, we thought we might see different kinds of journeys, maybe for younger folks, or different kinds of journeys for more urban sellers versus peri-urban sellers, or even slightly rural sellers. And in fact, we found this journey was pretty consistent across everybody we spoke to. Having completed this, Jane, do you mind, this work towards the end of last year, we came up with 3 areas of interest for the program, particularly in Ghana. The first is that although MSEs we didn't find were leveraging marketplaces to a great extent, we're still seeing, I think, a potential for niche marketplaces. And we weren't totally ready to discard marketplaces, mostly because what we found was that those of the MSEs we spoke to that were participating in marketplaces were earning 25% more than those who were not, right? So there's clearly an upside to using these marketplaces, but they're difficult. They're highly competitive. They require digital skills. They require bandwidth. And they don't always, if you're a corner shop selling primarily FMCG goods, you might not be able to compete with the folks that are on a traditional marketplace, like Amazon, for example. But increasingly, there's other opportunities for MSEs to compete in marketplaces that are more suited to them, right? That maybe focus on their artisanal qualities or on a particular value chain in agriculture. So we're hopeful to be able to work with companies in this bucket. The second bucket is the one that we're actually going to spend more time about talking today, which is what we're calling, thanks to DFS Lab, the SME solution stack. And what that is our solutions for MSEs that aren't necessarily about the customer-facing interaction, but rather about all the stuff that happens behind the entrepreneur, right? So input and inventory management, credit, and usually what we're talking about is a bundle of services that a fintech startup, in most cases, is bringing to the MSE to solve a bunch of problems at once. And we're going to hear from innovators in a few minutes about the exciting work that they're doing in that space. The last bucket that we'd love to be working with companies in is in tech-enabled logistics. This is obviously a huge opportunity, especially in urban African centers where these 2 programs focus, where there's a dependence on traditional motorcycle or bike-powered logistics that can't benefit really from warehousing and consolidation and finding ways to bring down those costs, because this actually tends to be a percentage-wise a big cost of getting remote work done for MSEs. So with that, let me spend about just 2 minutes diving into the MSE solution stack. And what you see on the left is a nice little graphic prepared by IFC about actually a Mexican company called Tienda Pago, in which it kind of illustrates the complexity of the solution these kinds of startups are bringing to the table, right? So what we're seeing is that there's an app that the MSE receives that to interact with our startup. Via that app, they're placing orders, they're making payments, they're probably getting insights about how their orders and sales might be going. Sometimes there's a POS kind of element to help the MSE actually accept digital payments that often enables a kind of rotating digital credit. For the startup as an intermediary, that means that they can think about things like bulk and aggregated pricing and purchasing, that the savings of which they can then pass on to the MSE. They take care of warehousing, logistics often. They're the ones who are collecting and aggregating data on what's happening in last mile purchasing, getting to share those insights back up with distributors or even producers. So it's a very complex, extremely tailored, very sensitive kind of model. And Jane, at the next slide, the reason that we're so excited about this model, is that they're solving a bunch of pain points all at once. Meaning that, it's a very user-specific, user-centric solution, and which is great, which is music to our ears. They're having to solve for the fact that MSEs often in these environments have a preference for cash, a habit of using cash, that there's generally not a sort of record of how sales have been going or what they've been selling for them to look at for past intelligence. There's often like a complex financial life in which the business is wrapped up in the household. Those expenses are all mushed. I mean, there's a great deal of flexibility needed to make sure it works, that as there's push and pull in the household, that expresses itself at push and pull in the business. The startup needs to craft a solution that can adapt and respond to all these situations and still deliver the efficiencies and the innovation we're looking for. That's necessary to make this model work. The good news is that these startups are making it work, and we're really proud to be featuring a handful of them in today's panel. In the next slide, I'll just say a couple of things to wrap up, which is that, for those of them that get this right, the opportunity is huge. Across emerging markets, MSEs and SMEs are the bulk of businesses. They're 95% of enterprises in the world. They're responsible for the vast majority of employment across Africa and across most emerging markets. They're desperate for these kinds of solutions, right? So we keep hearing about the credit gap and this missing middle. This is exactly the kind of business that would, getting these kinds of businesses credit would be exactly filling that gap. We are seeing that the acceptance for digital solutions is growing, accelerated by the pandemic, as we just talked about. So they have the devices, the know-how, the accounts, et cetera, to be able to participate in these solutions. And the initial evidence, and again, as I was saying, evidence is hard to come by, is very promising. A really nice study of Tienda Pago, as I just mentioned, found that merchants that participate in Tienda Pago solution increased sales by 15 to 25%, or didn't find that, predicted that was what was happening based on kind of order transactions. Some work that Action Venture Lab did with one of their portfolio companies, Field in Nigeria, found that not only did the number of items ordered increase, it increased during the pandemic, which is to say that even as the rest of the economy is shrinking, e-commerce is not. It's actually growing on the back of this thing. So a huge opportunity. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Coyote and look forward to hearing from our innovators firsthand.
Thank you, Malika. That was thanks for sharing the awesome insights. That was really, really nice. I'd like to encourage our audience as well. Please, as we continue with the webinar, please feel free to drop in your questions using the chat feature. This research that was just shared is based on our own findings, but it would be interesting as well to know, from the market you operate in, your country, are you seeing this? If you can also, share using the chat function, that would be great. Thanks again, Malika. All right, we'll move quite swiftly. And this is the part that gets exciting as we move into the panel discussion. I'm really looking forward to what comes out from these discussions. And today, we're joined by three of our innovators that are building inclusive tech solutions in Ghana and also in South Africa. We have Joseph, CEO of Boost Ghana, Kingsley, CEO of Kudigo, and Tina also joining from South Africa. She's the COO for A2Pay. I'd want the innovators to spend 2 minutes, quickly introduce themselves, and also share quickly what the company does, what solution they try to solve. So I think we can start with you, Tina. Sorry, I think you're on mute.
There we go. Apologies. Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. My name is Tina Mason. I'm the COO for A2Pay. We are a fintech company that has partnered with the Jobs Fund here in South Africa to deliver a tech solution that reduces the barriers to sustainable employment and facilitates access to capital and economic inclusion. We're sitting on 3,500 customers, or sites as we call them, merchants who are on our platform, and this will double between now and the end of next year. Our company is about 85 to 90 people, and we'll be growing by another 30 probably between now and the middle of next year. Much of what was shared now was mirrored in the South African economy in terms of what we saw with regards what happened at the point of COVID and how these particular markets respond. We don't refer to the informal sector as informal. We prefer to use the term primary market. Our understanding is that if you change your language, you change everything about it. So we talk about the primary market, and that's how we approach what we do. I'll explain a little bit more about our methodology later.
Thank you, Tina. There are already loads of things to really, get from you. So I'll pass it on now to Joseph.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joseph. I'm co-founder and CEO of Boost Ghana. Boost Ghana is the founding franchisee of Boost, which is a venture building platform building businesses across Africa to enable MSEs to be able to thrive in the digital economy. In Ghana, we've started our work in the retail of fast-moving consumer good sellers segment. So this you would call mom and pop shops. And so our solution for them is very simple at this moment, which is to provide them with a one-stop shop to enable them to be able to restock their stores. So what we do is to find them the best suppliers with the best prices and deliver the goods to them so they don't have to close their stores and go to open markets and combing 70 to 100 different distributors to be able to restock their stores. So our solution allows them to be able to do this simply from their mobiles and also with the help of some field officers where they need help in onboarding so they can get their stock, keep their stores open, transact longer. And as they transact more with us, we credit score them and we're able to extend to them stock advances that allow them to be able to sell over and above their current working capital. So in a nutshell, that's what Boost is about. We've just started in Accra. We've not yet covered the whole of Accra, but we're making significant progress. The idea is to cover the whole of Accra by the end of this year and move into some other cities in Ghana. Boost is also live in South Africa, where in South Africa we're looking into the restaurant segment, and in Nigeria also looking into the retailer segment. There are many more countries on our radar to open up before the end of this year.
Great. Thanks a lot, Joseph. And Kingsley. Kingsley, are you there?
Yeah, sure. Is it better now? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So my name is Kingsley Abrokwa, and I'm the Chief Enabler here at Kudigo. So Kudigo is a digital commerce and retail tech startup. And what we basically do is we innovate around solutions for retailers in Africa. And what we try to achieve is help these retailers to digitize what they do without going through a huge learning curve. So we deploy what we call a storefront product. And what that simply helps them do is manage their business as it is using a digital platform built within an African context, built based on what they know how to do. Currently, we are based out of Ghana, where we have our head office. We also have businesses in Nigeria as well. Over the past 3 years, we currently support over 7,000 retailers, mostly in the micro and small and informal staff sector. And our goal is to be able to help these businesses scale their businesses from an in-store solution all the way to digital commerce. And I look forward to an interesting discussion with everyone today. Thanks, Kayode.
Thank you, Kingsley. Thanks, everyone. So yeah, I think we can go into the discussion, but just before then, we also have an investor on the panel joining to really make our discussion today very rich. I'd like to introduce Areta Drinker. She is an investor and an investment analyst at 4DX Ventures. Welcome, Aret, and thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here and looking forward to a great discussion.
Great, thank you. All right. As we've seen from the Catalyst Fund investment, brief, which we shared a couple of weeks back, there are different opportunities for digital commerce. Malika was just showing a couple as well. However, we still see that MSEs still struggle to participate in digital commerce. So, I would like to really kick off the panel session by throwing out a question. And it's really about MSEs. Do MSEs that don't participate in digital commerce, is this because of cost? Is it because of the experience? Is it with regards to device and connectivity? So, this is really looking along the lines of the AAA. Is it the affordability? Is it the accessibility? And as I try to ask these questions to our panelists, I'll also want to throw it open to the audience, the participants as well. It will be interesting to really, get your thoughts. So I would like to leave quick 3 seconds to just get our audience to make their selection. So again, MSEs don't participate in digital commerce because of, is it cost? Is it experience? And I know this question, could be seen as generic, but if you could answer also with the context of where you are, the solutions you offer in your own market, and then we can look through this. So another 2 seconds, and then maybe we can close the poll. And Joseph, I'll be coming to you first, so maybe you can use this time to gather your selection or your pick. Okay, I think more than half of the audience voted. Okay, thanks, Jane. So we won't reveal, or we already revealed? Okay, it's fine. I think we can call these up again, but I would like to quickly go to you, Joseph. What's your thought on this?
Sorry, I was on mute. I think it's a multivariate environment. So I think that it's an interplay of all the 3 factors that are listed there. In our own journey, we've seen that some people did not even start at all because they didn't have the connectivity. And then the experience, like we always say that there is a commerce before the digital, right? So if the experience is not great, whether it's offline or online, it doesn't really work for them. So the experience needs to be great. And then you can also talk about the role of the people, whether they are digitally savvy or not, before they come online. And you can't ever rule out cost, the cost of payment and so many other cost of data and all of those involved. So it's an interplay of factors.
Great. I like your comment on this commerce before digital. Often than not, we get this mixed up in the ecosystem. Thanks for that. Kingsley, what's your thought on this?
Thanks, Kayode. So my thought is that, again, from what we've been doing, realize that these business people, these retailers, have been doing business for so long, right? And sometimes the mistake we as innovators make is trying to bring the innovation in to replace what they've been doing for so long. So for me, at the end of the day, it's like Joseph said, it's a variety of the responses you gave, but I think it's more about it being built in the context of what problems they are facing and how the tech can really enable them and not try to come and replace what you're used to. So it comes as a probably more of like a competition to them. All these are supposed to help them. And so not putting it in the right context and try to think that because it's software, they need it. They would say that they actually don't need it because they've been doing this for the past 20 years and they are still in business. So really, I think the context of how the solutions are pushed to them is very critical to figure out whether they really will use it or not before stuff like experience and cost will then come in there. Other than that, there's no point in trying to innovate for them because they won't accept it.
Yeah. So, I mean, really innovating for their needs makes a lot of sense. Thanks. Tina, it'd be interesting to get your own perspective as well.
Thank you. Yes, lots of interesting things from the previous speakers. You know, SMEs suffer from, well, our research shows us that they really struggle with 5 pain points: a lack of access to technology, a lack of access to training, different from experience, a lack of access to capital, a lack of access to bulk buying, and then in our case, specifically in South Africa, a highly unregulated market. So very difficult to protect businesses in this type of environment. And with those pain points, you then have, because people don't have technology, their level of numeracy and understanding about the financials in their business makes cost an issue. Many of the businesses are doing extremely well. Many of the businesses are flourishing and have done for decades. But as Kingsley said, they're working with a 20-year experience in cash. And so that cash is not allocated correctly. There isn't a distinction between household and business, et cetera, et cetera. So cost becomes an issue. And then we looked at this complex thing called adoption, whereby you looked, how do you get people to adopt a new technology and a new behavior? And part of our methodology was to reduce the barriers to adoption. So adoption is one of them. How complex is the technology? How much behavior change are you asking for? All sorts of things like that. And then obviously connectivity, cost of connectivity, data. In our case, we suffer with theft of cables, we suffer with intermittent service, we've got Faraday cages, you know, people working in containers, and so we work around those. But mostly we've discovered it's about, if you can address those 5 pain points methodically, effectively, systematically, you can get this transition.
Thank you, Tina. You already started unpacking this this for us.
Sorry, I'm ahead. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, just before I hear from you as well, Harriet. Jane, if we can reveal the poll results now. Great. Oh, wow. So from the poll, it tends more towards the experience. Okay, interesting. Harriet, what's your take here?
Yeah, I think to the points that all the innovators have raised, it is a connection of all these 3, a function of all these 3 points. But if you were to force rank, as you've seen from the poll, I think experience not necessarily being like the user's exposure to the use of technology, but as to what the user sees as value proposition and what level of behavioral change, as Tina was mentioning, would be required for them to adopt the technology. And so we've seen various companies who have tried to push out technology, and the merchants receive it. They take what's best or what is convenient for them from the business model. And typically the last thing to be adopted is the actual use of technology. For example, if you wanted a merchant to order from an app, they would still call you than order from the app. But then they want to use your product and they will pay for it, no problem, but they will just not use your app. So I think that boils down to user experience and right on to what Kingsley was mentioning, how the product is being positioned to the merchant. So I agree with all that's been said here.
Great, absolutely. And just looking at the feedback from the polls, there are 9 people that have said device / connectivity. Will be interesting to know, if you can share through the chat, what your thoughts are on this and what's your experience. I think it's useful for everyone on this webinar to be able to learn from that. But still on you, Harriet, we've got interesting innovators in the room. There are lots of ideas coming up lately. What other sort of, innovations, digital commerce innovations are you seeing, especially come out of, West Africa, that addresses informal MSEs?
That's a very interesting question. So looking at the broad spectrum of the informal market, right, there is so much there's so many problems. And Malika mentioned in her presentation that there are so many varied pain points and issues, right? And that presents an opportunity for several models to exist. And so I have seen a lot of companies approach it from the more infrastructural point of view, where they provide in the warehousing, they provide in the last mile logistics fleet, and we have a few of those in our portfolio. And that has gained quite some success, just not in West Africa, but just generally across the continent. And even think about it in most other emerging markets. There currently is a wave of more asset light, if you call it that, more asset light technology layer, sort of helping or boosting the same or trying to attain the same goal, which is helping merchants manage their inventory and as such being qualified for more sophisticated financial services like credit, right? So they are not necessarily providing the warehousing, but they are also helping you source in a more effective way, record inventory, and use that data to help assess you from a credit worthiness perspective and provide credit to you. So those models are also working. There are people that go very concentrated and just do last mile plus merchant services. What do I mean by that? Which is basically there are different sizes of merchants. So there are a specific group of merchants who do not even have a storefront. They're just like sitting in their homes and transacting on social media, right? They have nothing. It's just a mobile phone. And there was an opportunity to create a bundle of services that make these people actually grow from their living room to potentially having a storefront online to potentially owning their own warehousing, even though it's not necessarily the point, but to sort of help these merchants grow. So that is another business model. But to the point is, there are so many things that are being done in this space that I think I see working because the problem is big.
Absolutely. I like the fact that you put, asset light and boosting in one sentence. I think that really just speaks to the value prop of boost. So I'll go straight to you, Joseph. You also mentioned earlier, micro and small enterprises, they often have to close their shops, to go out to restock, go into the market to get additional products. And oftentimes when this happens, they're really losing a lot on sales. So, and with your own solution, you're really trying to address this problem by digitizing the process. I guess my question is, what exactly do you bring to the table for these MSEs? What is new, if I put it that way?
Okay, yeah, I'll just address it by mentioning how we started. When we set out, all we wanted to do was build a data product, get insights, help the retailers manage their store, provide inventory management without having to do any of the commerce related activities. Then we found that there was a very long learning curve. All the barriers of device data, we found that, but we discovered accidentally that they were struggling to restock. And we realized if we can innovate to help them address the basic need, which was at the center of their business, we could fast track the adoption, and then of that build the other services that we wanted. And so we initially we started enlisting suppliers and wanted suppliers to do the fulfillment themselves. But if they did at all, it took forever. And sometimes the goods will arrive when the retailer doesn't need it because the ecosystem was not ready to be able to do the fulfillment. So we had to find ways of doing the fulfillment ourselves and find low-cost ways of doing the fulfillment, because for a mom and pop shop, their margins are very thin, and therefore they're not able to afford very expensive fulfillment costs. So we needed to really get innovative, find within our ecosystem very affordable ways of getting the fulfillment, and also meeting their demands around turnaround time and their need for low prices. So that's what sent us to go look for the big distributors and manufacturers, try to aggregate, and by aggregating, we're able to buy at low prices and deliver the low prices to them. And we use tricycles that are in the ecosystem of the retailers. And in fact, our very early tricycle riders were recommended by these same retailers with whom that the retailers are very comfortable and they are reliable. So that helped us to get over the trust breach to get the early adoption and be able to do the fulfillment for them. So, and very central to our value proposition is this asset-light model where we do not own any truck ourselves. We're using independent entrepreneurs who are tricycle owners in the ecosystem of the retailers. Our work is to train them, equip them, tool them so that they can get the deliveries to the retailers in good time, in the way that they want it. And everything is done through mobile. And the last thing I would say is when we started, we developed an Android app, and we found that there was a learning curve, even in downloading, having space on the device to be able to have get the Android app. But a number of them, as Malika shared earlier, had some social media, had WhatsApp. And so we pivoted quickly and developed our solution within WhatsApp. So this is a chat-based solution. So they didn't have to download an extra application. Just through what they're used to, they're able to engage with our platform.
Thanks a lot, Joseph. I mean, Kingsley, what's your own experience? And I mean, if you can share in possibly 2 minutes, I know there's a lot to share, but if you can share in 2 minutes, I think for you with your business at Kudigo, you're serving a broader set of merchants. And I mean, what I would like to know is your core product in itself. How does it address, I mean, MSC inclusivity, especially in this post-COVID world?
Yeah, thanks, Coyote. So what we try to do is, again, like I said in my earlier submission, try to build a product that fits their context currently. Today, if you go to the markets, go to any retail store, they have a way of capturing data. It might not be the way you and I want them to capture data, but they are capturing data in one way or the other, either in a book or some way that works to their strength. So what we focus on, know how to capture data. Can we help you digitize how you capture data? And it went through a variety of means. And we have a storefront, actually an Android application, but then the distinction is that it works fully offline. Because again, data connectivity is a huge problem on the continent. So what we said, that look, you know, if you have an Android phone and you are able to use it to make calls and do WhatsApp as well, why not use the same phone to sort of, you know, digitize the data that you're actually writing in the book? The second thing was also about user experience, right? You know, apps can easily become complicated. We're trying to throw so many features in there, like, okay, do this, do that, do this, do that. We try to focus on, okay, what is the one thing that you want to do? So somebody say probably, I just want to capture my expenses. I just want to just sell to a customer. They focus on that single feature and use that in the product. And by trying to, again, learn from the user. So for us at Kudigo, our approach is that, look, we understand the tech, we don't understand the business. You understand your business, tell us how our tech can enable you grow your business. So in onboarding merchant, I focus on that particular value prop. What do you want to do today that we can help you to do? And then focus on getting them to do that particular thing and then move them up the value chain. I mean, today we have merchants who just started from our storefront product, have now launched on their online store as well, even using our WhatsApp bot as well. But then it's growth that they sort of propel themselves, not as forcing them to go where they were not ready for. So that is how we've been able to sort of handle this and keep learning from the merchant and see how we can help them to grow using the tech that we provide.
Great. I would like to come to you. I mean, Tina, I mean, you've been in business now for, I believe, over 10 years. And I mean, we've heard from, I mean, Kingsley and also Joseph on how they're actually going through this with the different solutions. I think my question to you is, what else? What else is possible? What else is available? I think there's so much being done now, especially across onboarding MSEs and also being able to address their inventory issues, stock management. What else do you see based on your experience that can still be done on top of this?
So it's an interesting one. Our focus is a combination of high touch with the training and a coaching around behavior change, and then utilizing the technology and the ecosystem. So what we learned was that if you can, our whole focus is to ready a merchant for financial inclusion. And in order to apply for credit to solve, well, working capital is oxygen for businesses. In order to apply for credit, three things have to happen. One is you have to change their behavior from cash to digital, increase their levels of numeracy, and then get people to really on board with the technology. So the business tool is a point of sale device that provides everything, inventory management, accounts for users in the market, right down to all the business information. And all we do is we obsessively focus on getting people to get themselves ready to apply for access to capital. Once we've got people to apply for access to capital, they then, as Kingsley said, do the best. They then start. They know how to do this. So, and because we are working in a developmental credit environment, we are able to navigate some of the issues that banks face, for instance.
Yeah.
So what we've seen is when someone adopts I'll be quick, when someone adopts the technology, they see a 30% increase in their turnover, and when they get access to capital, they see a 30% increase again. And the idea is to get people to open second shops. Our major focus with the Job Fund is to ensure that people employ people. So there's a huge job creation element to our business as well.
Great. Thanks a lot, Tina, for sharing that. Again, I would like to encourage our audience. Please feel free to drop your comments. I see there's some engagement already in the chat, but if there are any specific questions, especially for our panelists, ensure to bring that up. I'll move on quickly for interest of time. I think we all agree that building for informal SMEs, it's complex. I mean, there are myriads of problems out there, especially concerning also behavioral change, which is, I mean, quite daunting. My question is to you, Kingsley. For you, you actually building, you have a solution with many, I mean, sort of different customer segments in the market. How exactly are you able to manage building for the informal MSEs and also grow sustainably?
So that's a very interesting question. I think for us, our growth is fueled by how useful our solution is to our MSMEs we support. And I'll give you a typical example. When COVID hit in 2020, I mean, for a company that offers a software as a service, we focus on making revenue through subscriptions. But then what COVID did for these merchants was that it brought about the need for them to digitize. Meanwhile, they didn't have the money to pay for the software. So although through 2020, our revenues was very low, we increased our merchant base by over 800%, which meant that we were getting more merchants using our solution, but then they couldn't pay for it. So we had to quickly figure out, okay, how else can we stay relevant in terms of revenue aside monetizing these things from these merchants? So really, what we've learned is that if we are able to build a solution that is really useful to these merchants, they will grow, and in effect, we will grow with them. It might not be in the very early stage of getting them to pay X amount for subscription every month, but once they continue to use it and it becomes very sticky for them, it becomes part of their way of life, and they can't do without it. So for us, for growth, we only look at how useful are we being to these merchants, and will they continue to use our top-front solution, even if you probably give them $1 million to use yours, which I hope you won't anyway. But yeah, that's my feedback on that.
Yeah. I agree absolutely with you. Joseph, I'd like you to quickly address a particular thing that is actually burning for me, and I think it's also good to share with the audience. Via our research, there's the topic of trust. Trust always comes up, especially when you speak about digital commerce. But what we see and hear from our work is when it comes to actual digital payment, mobile money in itself specifically, most merchants are actually quite open to that. But the issue really is still in them trusting and leveraging the online platforms to really trade. If possible, in just 2 minutes, if you can share what your experience has been, if we zoom in a bit more on the digital payments and how that has been for you.
So first on the commerce itself, there's still a number of factors that are influencing the adoption. Kingsley mentioned earlier that a number of the MSEs have been in business for long, and a number of the mom and pop shops have been in business. I'm sure where you were raised, you would find shops that were there when you were kids. They are still there and haven't expanded much, and the way they do business haven't changed much. And so they have some secret sauce that they are holding on to, and so asking them to change all of a sudden is not the way to go. But for us, because our proposition is to help them restock, there are some behaviors that are quite difficult to bring online. For instance, there is that market experience and the social element to how retailers shop, and they have built relationships with a lot of the distributors over the period. And so for them, restocking is not just a financial or business transaction, but it's also a social transaction, which when you take that away, it's not very easy to replicate that online. It is something that we continue to work on. And so we ourselves spend time to be able to give them that kind of social experience that they look for when they are restocking. So it's one of the elements that we always need to keep track of. We also find that like you can't take away the experience. Some have also tried it and the experience have not been great. As I mentioned when we started, we said let's list suppliers and let the suppliers do the delivery. But then the delivery either never happens or it happens when the patient is already dead. And therefore that initial bad experience, like it doesn't help them and they wouldn't want to try it ever again. And then there are all kinds of perceptions from fraudulent transactions on mobile money, which although may not be true, they may not have experienced it themselves. They associate with all other digital platforms, and which is impeding their adoption of digital commerce as well. And then the cost. So with digital payments, the service that is more ubiquitous is the P2P transaction. So even with us as bulk buyers, there are a number of the distributors who, although they are willing to accept the mobile money as payments, they will say you should add the charges to it, right? So that cost of saying that cost involved in the payment, which is not involved in exchanging cash itself, is a barrier to the adoption of the digital channels for doing business. Because remember, I mentioned that their margins are very thin. So any additional cost that they cannot equate to any value immediately, like completely puts them off from coming online to do business.
Joseph, I think there's a lot that you would want to share on this. And
Yes.
I think we really need to come up with another webinar that just really zooms in and focuses more on that. For interest of time, I would like to really, want us to quickly discuss on partnerships as well, especially for you as innovators, focusing possibly more on, Kudigo and Boost. So for you, Joseph, I would like you to just quickly share your experience so far with regards to partnership and what you're really looking for. We have, on this call, there are people from different industries. So it'd be interesting to really quickly know what your take on partnership is and what your sort of ask is. We can really keep it short.
Okay, all right. So for us, given our business model of staying asset light to ensure that we can deliver at least cost to our retailers, and to ensure that our retailers would get the maximum benefit, we need a lot of ecosystem players like those who are working in payments industry to ensure that our retailers can receive money. Like we need to be able to convert the physical cash into digital money. So one of the reasons why retailers are not receiving so much digital money is because the usage instances are low. If the supplier prefers them to pay in cash, then there's no reason for them to keep digital money. But if we can have more avenues for them to be able to get the liquidity in digital money, that is very helpful. And then we need more suppliers to be able to come online and change the mode of distribution, or partner with us so that they can reduce their own cost of distribution, move goods faster and in line with the demand of the retailer and not their predetermined push, which is it's quite encouraging, the reception that we're receiving from a number of them. And then telco, everybody, we've spoken a lot about data, the cost of data, the quality of data as well. And so those are some of the few partnerships that are required, and logistic providers as well, to remain least cost and drive the value to the retailers.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you so much. Kingsley, very quickly.
Yeah, so I think like just on what Joseph said, partnerships have been key for us in terms of our growth. As startups, as innovators, you can't do everything, right? You can do one part of the value chain and then look at other businesses, be it big corporate, be it BAM, be it FMs, who can actually help you get to the next stage. So for us, that's critical to our growth strategy. We partner with banks, with FMCGs. At the end of the day, the value sets for the retailer. All of them want to get that data from the retailer. So you figure out how you can sort of tie all those things in, you will surely have a product that, the retailer will love, and partners can also help you push it to market in a very short period of time.
Thank you. Thank you, Kingsley. At this point, I would like to take a call from the audience. If anyone with a show of hand, if you want to actually ask your question directly, please let me know with a show of hand. Okay, if there are no questions, and also going through the chat, I'm not sure there's any specific questions to take. Okay, I think I would like to hear from you, Harriet, as the investor in the room. Speaking of partnerships, what do you think is still on the table? What do you think, where do you see the gap, especially as an investor? And for other corporates, how do you think corporates can better work and collaborate with innovators?
Great question. And I actually have a question for the innovator. So if there's time, I would ask it. But to the question that you're asking me, when it comes to partnership, right, with corporates, I think that the informal sector has always been large, and like the big corporates do not have visibility. And so all this innovation around it has increased the appetite of corporates and other institutions to want to do something or get that visibility and tap into that market. It doesn't make sense for them most times from a cost perspective to do it, given like the small transaction values and just the amount of work they need to do to aggregate those transaction values. However, they would like to partner with companies. And so I would say that the appetite to do that from a corporate perspective exists. Now, a lot of the things that need to align is incentives and interest, right? So for corporates, if you can strike a commercial interest with them to say, okay, we have volumes, we have information, we have this, we have been able to do the aggregation that you are unable to do, then you have at least a seat at the table to have a conversation. I understand that it is not the easiest thing to get into the room, but these are some of the things that, in my opinion, or at least conversation with some corporate, they look out for. They want to have aligned interests. They want to know that you actually have a customer base and a product that is working. Now, once you are able to establish that, it is driving towards other goals other than commercial. So for some corporates, it is great to have a commercial relationship, right? But the volumes, if you look at it from their perspective, is insignificant. So what other thing can you drive? Is it more inclusive, or diversity? Like, can it drive towards any of their own sustainable development or their own sustainable goals that they cannot or are not able to achieve at the moment? So those are kind of the dynamics that I see, but mostly I think the appetite is there, and that companies that are operating in this space actually have the opportunity to strike some really interesting partnerships.
Great, thank you. I see we are just on the hour now. I will just quickly try to wrap up in the next 3 minutes. As Catalyst Fund as well, for the IDC program in Ghana, beyond just the bespoke venture building support that we offer and the investor connections that we offer, we also help the companies in our cohort to foster partnerships that are relevant for them to thrive within the ecosystem. And as you can possibly see on the screen, we're looking to partners that are able to work with us through our journey of ensuring that for all innovators in the ecosystem, there's that innovation pathway that is solidified. So please feel free to reach out to us if you have any possibilities on how we can actually partner. And if we can go to the last slide, Jane. I also know we have a couple of startups in the room. We will be beginning sourcing for our second cohort shortly. And there are a couple of criteria that we have. I won't go into that for interest of time. Please visit our website if you're looking to actually be considered for the second cohort. Thanks, everyone. I think this has been a very short webinar, but I think it's also been very insightful within the time that we've had. I would like to thank everyone for joining in, and I'll wish you a wonderful evening. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks, Jess.